Access to clean water resources is a growing problem across the world as many countries are facing the water scarcity. One of these countries is Australia. It is the driest inhabited continent, and a vast amount of its water resources are used for producing crops. These crops are exported around the world to countries including Japan, China, and the United States. In fact, one major agricultural region of this food exporter country is Marine-Darling Basin. First of all, what is a basin? A drainage basin is a region where a stream receives runoff, through flow, and groundwater flow. Because it catches water, it is also called the catchment area. Marine-Darling Basin is the football of Australia. It has a combined river length of around 3,700 kilometers and is regarded as the longest river in the continent. Covering about 14% of the country, the basin is located in southeast Australia. It is made of Murray River and Darling River. This river system sustains the ecological diversity. Hundreds of endemic animal species have been recorded in this basin. This basin also historically supports the livelihoods and the cultures of the indigenous people. So how did the water crisis happen in this basin? Here is David Draverman, the Executive Director of River Management, giving an introduction of the basin's history.
We built large numbers of farm dams, and increasingly we turned to irrigation to make land on floodplains and close to rivers more productive. All of these things have had major impact on the operation of our rivers and the health of our rivers. Governments built major dams to store water from one year to the next to try to level out the extreme variability in rivers. In the process, we changed many of our rivers from predominantly winter and spring to summer and autumn flowing. As the consumption of water increased, the flow to the sea decreased, resulting in increasing periods of high salinity in the lower lakes in South Australia. To prevent this change, we built barrages to prevent salt water entering the lakes. So, having supposedly guaranteed that the lakes would always be fresh, we then connected Adelaide's water supply to the River Murray, to the point that in periods of drought, up to 90% of Adelaide's water supply is sourced from the Murray. As demand for water for irrigation increased, we built more dams and made the existing dams larger, and we also connected the Murrumbidgee and Murray rivers to the Snowy River through the Snowy Mountains hydroelectric scheme, diverting more water west to turn the desert green.
As Mr. Draverman mentioned, the building of dams mainly for agricultural purpose leads to a series of environmental issues, including water salinity. People in Australia became increasingly concerned over the water crisis. Everyone who relies on the water from Marine-Darling Basin has been adversely affected. In order to relieve the problem of the water shortage in this region, the government established a federal agency, Marine-Darling Basin Authority. This agency developed Marine-Darling Basin Plan, which aims to sustain the environment while keeping the local communities and the economy in order. More specifically, the plan asks the government to allocate a certain amount of water entitlements to water users, and it buys water from these water users to return it back to the basin. The farmers can spend this money on developing more efficient irrigation techniques. However, this plan has aroused disagreement on water use limit between both the environmentalists and the farmers. Though the plan set a minimum amount of 2750 gigaliter per year of water to be recovered from water users, the environmentalists think the number should be increased to at least 3,000 to 4,000 gigaliter per year. And many farmers were angered by the limit of water use for agriculture. They continued to protest the plan and argued that it was not effective in preserving water resources. They also thought it would cause job loss and hurt agriculture industry badly. What do the indigenous people think of the plan? Do they think it is a fair plan? Indigenous people also think the plan is unfair. Although they depend on the river system for their cultural activities and drinking water source, they are little mentioned in the Marine Darling Basin Plan. The authorities acknowledge the significance of water to the indigenous communities, but the plan overall excludes them from the policy-making process. Though they may participate in the discussions, they are not as influential as farmers to get a fair amount of water allocation. Based on the path of least resistance, the indigenous people are the marginalized people because they have limited political and economic power to deal with the water crisis. Unlike agricultural farmers, they are excluded from the policy-making process. Though they did not overuse the water and were vulnerable to the water crisis, they have to face the difficulty living without sufficient suitable water. Since the plan overall seems to be unfair and inappropriate to solve the problem, who should be blamed? Should we think farmers are responsible for the water crisis? Let's move to how they contribute to the agricultural production. The agriculture industry in the basin produced 39% of agricultural production in Australia and generated almost half of the national income from food production. In this sense, farmers ensure the food security of the nation and develop the national economy by exporting these agricultural products. However, due to the water crisis, the overall water use in irrigation was reduced to 33% in 2009. The gross value of the irrigated agricultural production was down to 86%. Simply leaving the responsibility to the farmers is not fair for them. If the biggest water consumers are not entirely responsible, who should be responsible for the water crisis and the loss of economic growth? The underlying problem is the treadmill of production that encourages food production without considering water sustainability. The treadmill is fueled by constant demand from importing countries to meet the demand and develop its agricultural economy. Australia pushed for the growth in agricultural production. However, it only has limited water. The motives for growth eventually lead to environmental degradation that affects everyone. On a global scale, driven by the treadmill, Australia exports 60% of its total agricultural production to countries like China and the United States. However, this production is at the cost of the environment. Boomerang effect means when causing a consequence will be eventually affected by it. In this case, Australia exploits the water in an unsustainable way in order to gain economic growth from its agricultural sector. However, the unsustainability leads to environmental degradation, including water salinity and soil salinity. These environmental issues now have discouraged the agricultural business, which will eventually jeopardize the agricultural production of Australia and its economic growth from agricultural sector. Pursuing environmental sustainability now becomes a major barrier to the economic growth of the agricultural sector and food security of the nation. To relieve the environmental problem in the basin, it will undeniably harm those who have relied on the water for economic interest. However, there are still many people who do not have sufficient water for basic needs, such as the indigenous people. When thinking about complexity, it is necessary to figure out the values of water to different people in order to know how to distribute the water entitlements fairly. Learning from the structure of house sustainability, it is time for everyone to hold this responsibility and compensate the environment for what we have exploited from it.